friends, it's Carrie. Welcome back to my channel. So the results are in and you guys chose Happy Harvest as the next stamp set that I'm going to be using on my next project. Happy Harvest actually had the most votes, and then it was actually to combine the two sets, but I just went ahead and decided just to use the one set today. This Simon Says Stamp leaf border die that you see here, I actually did not wind up using on my card. I thought I was going to, and I initially was wanting to, but overall, as the card was coming together, I decided not to use it for today's card. But I will use it in the future. So it's a beautiful die. I just decided not to go that route with it. So I'm actually going to be using the die though to kind of map off, if you will, onto my white piece of cardstock the scene that I'm going to be creating. I am doing it this way because on Happy Harvest I actually have the dies coming, but I don't have the coordinating dies as I was making this card. And you guys, I was not about to fussy cut that tree out. I said, nope, that's something that I'm not going to even attempt to try because it was so intricate and, you know, a lot of just detail cutting. No, it was not in the cards for me today to do that. So I had to come up with a different way to incorporate this tree because obviously the tree is like the focal point of this whole stamp set. And I obviously did want to use it, but yeah, I was not going to be fussy cutting that tree out. So I had to come up with a way to use the set with this tree and make my scene. So I decided to kind of make a one-layer scene, if you will, and kind of create it from there. So I kind of laid out my stamps that I wanted to use from the set. I kind of went back and forth on which pumpkin to use or which, you know, whether to use the little birds or whatever. But overall, I decided to use the tree, the 3 little leaves falling from the tree, 1 pumpkin, and then 1 sunflower. So now I'm going to go ahead and ink this up with some Copic friendly black ink here. This is the Genie K amalgam ink here. And I am finding that I actually did a review of this ink, and I do love it. This piece of white cardstock that I am using, it is a leftover from a card kit that I recently did a video on as well. And it was just sitting on my desk, so I thought I would go ahead and use it up since it was just the perfect size. It was, you know, an A2 size. So I went ahead and used it. And then, of course, I'm going to be stamping this twice here because, you know, that's the nature and the wonderful property, I guess you say, of the Misti to be able to stamp twice. But back to my point here. On the cardstock, I noticed that whenever I started to color with my Copics, this is not the normal white cardstock that I usually use. My favorite white cardstock is the Paper Tray Ink Stamper Select White. And even watching my channel, you know this already about me and the favorite that I use. But like I said, I had this piece sitting out on my desk, and I decided to go ahead and use it up. Well, I don't know if it's the combination of the white cardstock or what, but in my initial review of this black ink, I used, you know, the cardstock that I normally use, which, like I said, is the Paper Tray ink, and it did not smudge at all whenever I stamped out some images to kind of test the Copics or whatever. But I found that whenever I started to color these images onto this piece of white cardstock, I noticed that there was actually a little bit of smudging. And I know in some of the recent videos that I have done using this ink, I have had several of you say to me that you are having problem with this ink and it's smudging. So I'm wondering if y'all are using the Nina. This is the Nina 110 pound cardstock. And so I'm wondering if that is the cardstock that y'all are using, because I did find that whenever I used this cardstock again and stamped these images down with this particular black ink, I did see just a little bit of smudging. And you really can't see it on camera too much, but in person, as I was creating the card, you could see just a little bit of smudging in my coloring. So I don't know what it is about the actual cardstock, because like I said, I didn't have any issues with it before in my review and the normal white cardstock that I do use. If it's just the two together or what. But anyway, I just kind of want to put that out there, kind of just let y'all know that I did find that this black ink did smudge just a smidge onto this particular white cardstock. So if y'all are having issues with that, check and see if it is the actual white cardstock that you're using. So to the coloring, I listed all of the colors that I did use on today's card listed above. And like I said, I'm kind of, as you can see, I am creating kind of like a one-layer scene. So I have to kind of use my imagination here and kind of ground my images. And, you know, this kind of always intimidates me because I'm not the best artist when it comes to drawing or anything like that. That's why I like stamping, because the images are already drawn out for me. But I kind of took a chance, and you know, I had to kind of, like I said, ground my images, create a background for them, not leave it so, you know, I had to give it a sky or whatever. So that's what I did at first, as you already saw, was use the BG10 to create a blue sky. It's a very light blue sky, and it kind of goes with the fall day, I guess. And then I created a little bit of a ground using my G24. And then used YG03 to kind of create a little bit of blades of grass, just a little bit of texture at the bottom. So now I'm going to work on my leaves here, and of course it is fall leaves. So I'm just kind of picking some fall-like colors to add to my leaves and kind of randomly color these little leaves in. You really don't need to do a whole lot of blending because these images are very small. So it really does not warrant for you to go ahead and do a lot of blending. Now I'm taking the E37 and kind of going against using that, how it's drawn in for me in the image, the wood grain of the tree. And now I'm going to take, I started out with a different color, but I decided to go ahead and use the E13 to color in the rest of the tree. And it's probably just a little bit light than I wanted, but I just went with it. It turned out just fine to me. So I'm going to go ahead and blend all these two colors together and then get this big old tree colored in. It does look kind of funny in the stamp set, if you notice that obviously on the tree here, right in the middle, there is a kind of like a blank space, kind of the wood where the wood grain stops in the middle. And there's actually a little bitty, there's actually two little smiley faces, if you will, that you could actually stamp in the middle of this tree. And that's why they actually left it blank like that. So at first it kind of looks kind of funny whenever you're, you know, coloring. But at the end, I think it turned out just fine. And the colors kind of really blended into the paper, and it kind of disguises that a little bit. So now I'm going to move on to my pumpkin, and I'm going to use the YR23 and YR14 for that. And I love these little pumpkins. I love both of the images of the pumpkins in this set. And I think the favorite of everything out of this entire set for me is the little sunflowers. This is the bigger one of the two. And I had to do a little bit of creative stamping, if you will, to get the sunflower stamped onto the stem there. But I'm going to use the YR23 for the darkest on the kind of the inside petals there. And then I'm going to use the YR18 to color out the rest of the petals. And then I'm going to color in the stems with the same G colors that I had, the G24 and the YG03, and then finish off with some little dot detail on the inside of the flower using my browns, the E37 and the E13. I believe I did add one of the darker colors of brown, but I don't remember which color that was. But I thought adding the dot detail on the inside of the flower added a little bit of texture to that flower overall. So once I get all of my images completed here, you will see that I've got like a 1-layer scene. And, you know, obviously you could use, you know, some of the birds in this little scene or whatever, but I think without having the coordinating dies or anything like that, I think that this little scene came out just fine, and it definitely represents a fall day. So now I decided to go ahead. I was kind of contemplating a couple of different ways to finish out the rest of my card. Like I said, I was initially going to use that frame, but it just wasn't working the way I wanted it to. So I decided to go ahead and create a very thin frame using my Hero Arts Infinity rectangle dies. And it really does help ground the green of the bottom of my scene here to that little frame. It just kind of ties it all together, and it breaks up that little scene there with the sea glass cardstock that I'm going to mount this on. Initially, I was going to try to make this an entire 1-layer card, but again, my thought process and the way it was coming together, it just wouldn't allow me to do that. And another reason why I actually cut this down was because I forgot to erase my pencil line around the whole scene there, and as I was coloring with my Copic, it kind of trapped in that pencil line, so I had to come up with another way to fix that. So that's another reason why I actually cut this down. You could do a couple of different things, you know, to disguise that. I was going to kind of draw a border around it with my ruler there. That's why you see my ruler in the shot. But then, you know, again, my thought process went in a different direction. So I'm kind of creating a little bit of a background onto my my card panel there with the sunflowers, and I use the Lawn Fawn Mermaid ink for that. Now I'm going to stamp out my sentiment using the same Lawn Fawn ink, and I'm going to stamp out the greeting Autumn Blessings, and it just really fits perfectly in that upper right corner there. And I use my Misti for that because, of course, I don't want to mess up at this point. So you can see how those sunflowers really adds to the background of this entire scene. It kind of frames it and really brings out that entire scene. So now what I'm going to do is add my frame around my panel here. And I thought the easiest way to do this, instead of adding little beads, you could just add little beads of glue around that frame and then place the scene onto the card and then add the frame around it. But I thought this would be just a little bit easier by taking some like thin tape. This tape that I'm using here is micropore tape. It's like a medical tape, and it's really thin enough to where it won't add any bulk or anything like that. But this made it easier for me to go ahead and add the glue onto the whole entire piece instead of adding the colored piece and then the frame piece in two separate ways. So now I'm going to create my card base here, which is a piece of KRAFT cardstock. I'm going to score that at 4 1/4, and it's going to be a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card there. Now all I'm going to do is add some liquid glue to the back of my panel here, my whole entire piece, and get that into place on my card base. Then I'm going to add a little bit of extra detail to my card before I finish it all up here. I'm going to get that lined up and really press down. I'm going to take my white gel pen, and I just felt like it could add, needed a little bit of extra something. So I took my white gel pen and added a little bit of shine mark details to the flower as well as the pumpkin and a couple of the leaves. I thought about doing it to the tree too, but I didn't want to go too far, and then if I went too far, I didn't want to regret it. So I just kind of stopped there with those things that I already added detail to. And then to finish up my card, I'm going to add some sparkle using my Nouveau Glimmer pen here. I love this shimmer pen. It's a really beautiful shimmer, and it really doesn't come off onto your hands all that much once it dries. And it really does bring out the background of that blue piece too. So that completes my card for today, guys. Thank you all so much for participating and choosing the 9X stamp set. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate it, and I will catch you all in the next video.